Okay, hello and assalamu alaikum. Today I want to discuss or comment on this great podcast that Sam had on his Waking Up podcast. I think it was with Doug Wilson. He's a Christian nationalist. I was introduced to him through this podcast. I didn't know a lot about him before this, but now I'm quite interested in him. Anyhow, this podcast, I think it was initially released, the first 45 minutes or so were released, and later on, after people commented a lot, Sam released the whole episode as a PSA. Now, I am a fan of Sam's. I have been a member of his Waking Up podcast, a premium member, not because I was a paying member, but because of the benevolence of the structure that Sam has built. I was a premium member till the time I did not start feeling that I have overstayed my welcome as a free member. So I left, and thereafter, since I do not have the uh, some spare cash lying around, and I could not become a premium member. So it was great on his part that he released this episode as a PSA. Now, I said I'm a fan of Sam's. I'm a Muslim, and it at least appears so that he has had an axe to grind with Muslims for so long now. I don't see it exactly that way, but that is how Muslims generally perceive him, if they know about him at all. And if they know about him at all, it's usually from that clip from Bill Maher's program, that infamous clip where he's arguing with the back then Batman, Ben Affleck. And Ben Affleck is the decent humanist guy who comes off as such to us Muslims. And Sam is the one who is actually, speaking awful things about Islam, like Islam is a motherload of bad ideas and so. But I know him a lot better than to just surmise that he's just a racist or a bigot. He has some objections and some concerns about Islam. I respect them. I don't think he's right in them, but I don't also blame him for it a lot because of the circumstances, the environment we are living in. I've read Sam's books like End of Faith, Letter to a Christian Nation. I have had his Waking Up book on my bucket list for quite some time now. I haven't had the time or the inclination to actually get into it, but I'll one day. Anyhow, I know the guy much better. That is why that clip did not produce the same kind of consequences and results that normally Muslims now house within their brains. So yeah, that's the reason. I'm softening the blow because any Muslim can come up to me and say that you are praising this bigot and this racist. So I want to cover that end also. I don't think he's a racist or a bigot, but I think he's misjudged Islam, not by a lot, but in some crucial ways. Okay, anyhow, I'm a regular listener of Sam's. He had this Christian nationalism podcast. He had some great questions from Doug Wilson. And although I'm interested in Christianity and Judaism as well, because that Islam comes from the same lineage, and we consider the Jews and Christians to be our elder brothers in terms of nations, because they were the first to receive guidance from God, and we believe in that guidance. We believe in the Bible, whether Old Testament or New Testament. Yeah, if someone wants to be pedantic, again, I must caveat it that the Torah, the Psalms, and the Gospels are the specific books that we have to believe in. Otherwise, we cannot be called Muslims. But yeah, we believe in other stuff also. We have a nuanced approach toward the Bible. We verify and endorse most of it, but there are passages in the Bible that we do not accept as accurate. But most of the time, our discussion is on interpretation of the Bible rather than the accuracy of it. So I want to comment on it as we go along, because it not only has consequences for Christianity, it has consequences for Islam as well, because we Muslims and Christians and Jews, no matter how much we go on about how different we are actually quite similar in many aspects. So most of the things discussed in this particular podcast, I found out that they would benefit us Muslims as well, whether we are coming from the angle of Islam or Christianity. So let's get into it. I'll play the clips and then comment on it. Of course, I'll delete most of the clips because I just want the crux of each clip. And I think I'll release the entire episode on my Patreon, but I'll keep some aspect of it on YouTube as well. So here goes.
I'm here with Doug Wilson. Doug, thanks for joining me.
Great to be with you. Thank you.
So yeah, you debated my friend Christopher Hitchens back in the day. That was probably, I don't know, 15 years ago or so. Do you remember what year you did those debates?
I don't remember the year. It was a wonderful time, actually. Christopher and I got along great, actually.
Yeah, you seem to. Because I watched the documentary that was born of that collision, that was literally titled Collision. And you guys were debating, if memory serves, whether Christianity is good for the world. That was the kind of the focusing question.
Yeah, correct.
So we probably won't recapitulate much of that. I mean, I think we might fall into debate on a few topics. I think that's inevitable. But what I really want to start with here is just to have you educate me and my audience about the American religious landscape. I just have a bunch of questions for you. Sure. I should say you have a new book titled Frequently Shouted Questions About Christian Nationalism.
Yeah.
So we'll get into that. But just to orient us, how would you describe your approach to Christianity, and how would you differentiate it from what most Americans might think of as mainstream Christianity, if that phrase means much?
So in the Baskins and Robbins of Christianity, what flavor am I? Right?
Yep.
Yeah. Rocky Road, that's what I am. Basically, I grew up in an evangelical home, conservative, Bible-believing parents. My mom had been a missionary in Japan. My father was a Navy officer who got out to do personal evangelism. So I grew up in a home that was decidedly Christian and evangelical. Evangelical I was born in 53. Evangelical during my boyhood, prior to Jimmy Carter, simply meant conservative Bible believers outside the mainline denominations. There'd been a big battle in the first part of the 20th century in the mainlines, the Presbyterian Church, the Methodist Church, and so on, between liberalism and what came to be called fundamentalism. Mm-hmm. And basically the liberals won and captured the mainline denominations. The conservative believers sort of retreated into the woods and built their own alternative structure. They abandoned the seminaries and built Bible colleges, built Christian radio stations, and stayed there until the 1970s, more or less. And I grew up in that quadrant of the Christian faith. Mm. In the 70s, you might say, led by Francis Schaeffer, polarized by Francis Schaeffer, the conservative believers re-engaged in what became known as the culture wars, back in the days of the Moral Majority and the Christian Coalition, those folks. And that was something that we were part of. And there has been, in recent years, after the election of Jimmy Carter, who was an avowed born-again Christian, there was a resurgence of people identifying themselves with evangelicalism, and it grew significantly, so maybe spectacularly, but became a movement. And then it too developed a right wing and a left wing, conservative and more moderate or liberal. And the most recent iteration of it would be COVID and post-COVID, where the red-pilled evangelicals, who have become more and more pronounced in their willingness to be Christian in public, has coalesced. And the moderates have done what has usually been done, which is try to mute these divisions and play well with others and try to get along as best they may. That's basically a 30,000-foot flyover of where I think we are.
So yeah, this is quite similar to the journey that Muslims have had in the past 100 years or so. We all know that the First and the Second World Wars were a watershed moment in this world, whereafter, liberal democratic values not only took hold around the world, but were actually implemented by a world structure that could be labeled as by force, but that's a negative word. Anyhow, similar journeys happened all around other places in Abrahamic religions as well. I am from Pakistan, and in here also, not only did Muslim nationalism underwent a major revival. You must have, or you might not have heard about names like Maududi or Hassan al-Banna from Egypt and other people like him, who actually, it was a sort of an old reaction that was coming back to us Muslims, similar to what he's expressing here about Christianity. But yeah, since the forces of liberal democratic values were too strong and too new, they were being experimented with, it was the new normal. So it went on. For instance, from early 20th century to around the end of 20th century, till actually making a major comeback in the Afghan war, where Mujahideen became triumphant with the help of America and the rest of the Western world against communism, the Soviet Union. This all had been described as a cosmic battle between good and evil. Actually, in Islam, we link it all with the second coming of the Christ as well, where America was the Christ and Soviet Union was the Antichrist, and Muslims were the people who were actually fighting the battle on the ground. But it was the support of America as a republic in terms of ammunition, in terms of intelligence, in terms of information, in terms of diplomacy, that actually pushed the Afghans over the edge, and they were able to. And those, by the way, weren't only Afghan Muslims. All the Muslim Mujahideen were collected and garnered together from around the world, and that is the actually origin story of the entire terrorism thing we found out later on. But that was actually a good movement going haywire, and that happens in this world a lot. It has happened in history a lot. So after that, now we as Muslims around the world are also experiencing this comeback of religion, of religious fundamentalism, and everything he has said. And similarly, there are multiple flavors here. You can find the entire spectrum of extremely liberal to extremely conservative and fundamentalist being occupied inch for inch. So the timeline might be a little out of phase with the American timeline he's giving, the Jimmy Carter episode, but it's almost the same. So it matters to us Muslims also, because the same nationalism that is there in America as Christian nationalism is here in the Muslim countries as Muslim nationalism. And both nations, the Christian nation in general and the Muslim nation in general, are dealing with its pros and cons right now. So I just wanted to put it in here that it's actually quite similar what has been happening with Islam, that has been happening in Christianity. Of course, the consequences are widely different because of so many reasons we can get into later on. But and I think Sam and Majid Nawaz went into it in their book, Islam and the Future of Tolerance, an excellent book. I don't agree with everything there in it, but it was pretty good coming from, because it wasn't actually there wasn't any shortfall on Sam's part, but because he was debating with a person who was a reformed extremist, Majid Nawaz, who I have tremendous respect for, but because he was a reformed extremist, he looked at certain verses of the Quran and the Hadith in a certain light that most of the Muslims do not look at it. So there are some concerns about that, but that was an excellent book. It was something that discussed some of the things that I'm mentioning here right now. So if anybody has not read it, he should go and read it. But I wanted to pitch this in because I want to connect why I'm making this video with why a Muslim is talking about Christian nationalism or interested in it at all. Let's see what happens next.
So would you consider yourself a Christian fundamentalist, a biblical literalist, an absolutist? How would you differentiate those terms? And which are you?
Yeah, that's great. I would consider myself a fundamentalist in the sense of believing the fundamentals of the Christian faith. I believe the Apostles' Creed, in other words. And I believe it in the sense that it was held when it was first handed down. But fundamentalist has also taken on cultural significance. So like a fundamentalist is someone who wears a black skinny necktie and is a King James Version only guy and that sort of thing. That's sort of a cultural phenomenon. And I'm not necessarily a fundamentalist in that sense, but I do believe the fundamentals of the Christian faith. I would describe myself as a biblical absolutist, which is not the same thing as taking the Bible literally. A biblical absolutist is someone who would take the Bible naturally, taking it the way it presents itself to be taken. So when Luke writes his gospel and he says at the beginning, I interviewed a bunch of eyewitnesses and I wrote it down carefully, he's presenting it as sober history. So I take it as sober history. Psalms that are poetry present themselves as poetry. I take it as poetry. When the book of Revelation presents itself as apocalyptic literature, I take it as apocalyptic literature and not as literal surveillance cameras of the future. So you want to take the Bible naturally and respect the genre in which it was written, whether it's history, poetry, prophecy, apocalyptic, and so on.
So taking the Bible naturally.
So this is again a great explanation of the various flavors or categories that the seculars have made out of core religionists. Uh, and it's not only seculars. I mean, we recognize these categories also. Once pointed out, there are fundamentalists, there are literalists, there are absolutists. So this is a good explanation, and almost similar explanation exists in Islam as well. These ISIS people, they are not only fundamentalists, not only absolutists, but they are literalists as well. And similarly, there are other organizations like the Hizb ut-Tahrir, once Majid Nawaz was the member of. I think you can clearly categorize them in a sort of a non-literalist or naturalist, what Doug was just saying.
Does the concept of biblical inerrancy do for you? Do you think the Bible is still inerrant, but some sections can't be taken literally? Or is that how that breaks
yes.
up?
So, for example, as a biblical absolutist, I believe the Bible. So I would say what the Bible intends to convey by what it wrote down, I seek to take it that way. So I seek to understand it the way it was originally intended, and then take that to the bank. But when Jesus says, I am the door, I don't look for a doorknob. Or in Psalm 23, you don't have to go find a green pasture to lie down in to be a good Christian. I don't take it literally that way.
Is there anyone who takes it literally Yeah, I mean, literally. I mean, I can't imagine anyone takes it.
There's some people who try. It cannot be done consistently, but there are some people that try. There's a school of theology called dispensationalism,
right?
And the watchword for that school of theology is literal unless absurd. So you take it literally unless that you find yourself dealing with round squares.
So why aren't you?
So this applies very much to Islam as well. Similar kind of factions have grown up here since the very early days of Islam. There has been a group known as Zawahir. These people believe in the literal interpretation of everything. Again, as Doug pointed out, they can't do it consistently everywhere, but they try their best to do it. So what these scriptures actually demand are to take them naturally. If it's a simile, it's a simile. If it's a metaphor, it's a metaphor. If it's an allegory, it's an allegory. If it's something literal, it's something literal. Yeah, people can make mistakes in designating something literal into a metaphor, or a metaphor into literal. That happens, but that happens within the confines of human reasoning and consciousness. Mistakes are corrected by other people. Their debates arise, and they are decided upon. Similar things have happened in Islam over the past as well, and in this era, it's still going on. So I think this is a very good distinction, that you have to be a naturalist about how scriptures are presenting themselves in. And yes, there are people who try and make everything literal. So those are those people do exist. They're quite few. And in this era that we are living in, and the sort of ISIS-like people and other people, you can categorize them in generally that category. Yeah, they would also not say that they are being absurd about this stuff, but that is a verdict that is given by others about them. And I think I agree with that verdict. So let's go ahead.
With dispensationalists then?
All right, so that's a big question, but I would say it boils down to the relationship of the Old Testament to the New Testament. So there are two basic approaches. One of them says that the Old Testament doesn't apply unless the New Testament says that it does. And the other view says the Old Testament applies unless the New Testament says that it doesn't. Right. So I'm a Reformed Christian, Reformed Presbyterian Christian, and not a dispensationalist. And I would belong to the school of thought that says the entire Bible is to be taken as the Word of God, and the Old Testament applies to us today, unless the New Testament says that it doesn't. And the principle, the central example of that would be the animal sacrifices in the Old Testament. So the animal sacrifices are there. The New Testament says that Christ's death fulfilled all the animal sacrifices. So we're not to we're not to offer up animal sacrifices anymore. So the New Testament says we're not to. So I say, good, we're not to. But the other approach basically parks in the New Testament first. And if the New Testament repeats something from the Old Testament, then okay, that's obligatory. Right. But they're New Testament centered.
Okay, so
this is again also very I can relate it to Islam as well, because there are people here that sort of draw the same relationship between the Quran and the Hadith. Hadith are the traditions or the sayings or the actions of the Holy Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him. They are, of course, extra Quranic. I mean, they exist separately and come from a separate source. which is quite debatable among the Muslims. Each hadith has to be graded before it can be accepted. But the Quran is something different, and it's the scripture. We believe, every Muslim in every sect and every faction believes in it, verse for verse. But again, there are differences in both. Sometimes Quran is saying one thing and the Hadith is saying another thing. So there are various approaches that people adopt to reconcile both. Some accept both, some reject one or the other, and they have their entire formulas and schools of thought on how to resolve this contradiction sometime arising from this. So this happens in a certain context in Islam as well. And since we believe in the Bible, but still you might be saying that if you're believing in the Bible, how can we go about our own law without making this distinction, as the Christians are doing about the Old Testament? That is because in Islam, we think a complete updated law was given anew. It's quite similar to the law that the Jews practiced, Jesus practiced in his life. It's quite similar to the same, but there are certain important updations over in there, and this has been discussed in the Quran in various words like "Ma nansakh min ayatin aw nunsiha na'ti bi khayrin minha aw mithliha." Okay, whatever we are abrogating right now in this new law, or forgetting it, we are bringing something similar or better. So, how we Muslims describe it is that the Judaic law was, since it was given in an ancient world with certain, limitations that arose out of the circumstances, the environment, the era they were in, and once a major update was given that matched the circumstances of that particular era, Muhammad and after Muhammad, peace be upon him, certain adjustments were made. So, for example, this person, Doug Wilson, is just referring to animal sacrifice. Yeah, I understand where he's coming from. That is a way to look at the Bible, that you can think that Jesus offered the sacrifice. I mean, within strictly the Christian faith I'm talking about, the Muslims don't accept that. But in Islam, animal sacrifice is there, but it was repurposed or, retouched in a manner that everybody living anywhere in the world can offer that animal sacrifice and does not actually need to bring it to the Temple Mount, or in Islam, the Mecca, the Grand Mosque or the Kaaba. That happens once a year, and that's not obligatory for every Muslim to attend. You have to do such a thing once in your life. So you see, the law was relaxed and what's the word I'm looking for? Adjusted according to the era we are living in now, so that it's practicable and is being practiced around the world by Muslims. So that's the kind of distinction I wanted to draw out here as well.
To get my bearings here, so how old do you think the universe is, based on your reading of the Bible or any other stream of information?
Yeah, based on my rudimentary math skills, the world is about 6,000 years old.
Okay.
So you see, I appreciate Doug's candor and sincerity. He did not, hedge his bets or anything. He came out clearly, and that's something that rises out of the description he just gave about himself, that he's a Bible absolutist, fundamentalist, and naturalist. So he thinks, because I think he explains further down the road, that because Bible has this lineage of certain families that came down from Adam and Eve, and then Noah, and further down. So if you add all those lifespans of individuals mentioned in there up, it comes to around 6,000 years that he's mentioning. And many Christians, we Muslims know about, are young earth creationists, and that's exactly what it means. We Muslims believe in those passages of the Bible. We believe in those lineages, but our viewpoint is that not every lineage is discussed in the Bible. These are certain important, significant figures that are mentioned. So, in our perception, not only are the lineages incomplete in there, because the Bible does not set out to actually or I should just say that Bible did not actually set out to decide the age of the earth. It set out to give some important lineages of people. Yeah, later on, maybe some, because we Muslims have this belief that certain passages have some inaccuracy in them. So where the Bible says that it totals to this much amount, yeah, we dispute that. But we accept those lineages. Anyhow, the world is much older than these lineages. The world did not start with Adam and Eve. It started before them. How much before them? We have no problem accepting the scientific designations like 14 billion years, say. We don't have any problem with that. It might be. Science is there to tell us that. The Quran, the Old Testament, the New Testament do not talk about it. But it's an inference that Christians have drawn in such a manner. We dispute that, but I think Doug is being very honest by applying his beliefs and narrating it straight away without actually hedging anything. So I appreciate him.
So
I'm a young Earth.
yeah, so
I'm a
that-
young
so-
Earth creationist.
right.
Yes.
Okay. So anyone kind of coming at this from the outside, from secular society, trying to fit you in the canonical debates around the collision between science and religion and evolutionary biology and Christian theology understands which side of that argument you're on.
Right. I'm an anti-Darwinist, young Earth creationist.
Right.
Having said that, and I know that many of your viewers and people who follow you and have read your stuff are going to park me right next to the flat Earth guys, because of that statement of how old the world is. But one of the things that I would just point out in passing is when people say that the universe, the cosmos, is 14 billion years old, or whatever the current number is, they are presupposing a Newtonian balcony somewhere that they get to stand on to watch the whole thing. And one of the things that relativity shows us is that time is not what my question would be, where is the cosmos 14 billion years old? Is it at the center, at the point of the explosion? Is it at the event horizon? What clock are you using to calculate the age of the Earth? Well, generally, the rudimentary textbook answer is we imagine a Newtonian clock, and it's like an earthbound perspective. And I would say things like time and eternity are not that simple.
Okay, I take my words slightly back because I think now he's hedging. Although he's sticking to his number, but he's stating that we can somehow subsume this 14 billion figure as well among within the 6,000 years time frame, which is not possible. And I think it can be pointed out very easily that whether or not there's a Newtonian balcony or not, the way we calculate years and months and days on Earth, exactly in those terms, time behaves. This calculation that has been done that goes to around 14 billion years is presupposing the same duration of calculation that we use for our everyday purposes. It's not something that we imagine a Newtonian balcony. We are on this earth. We calculate years and days. We tell you that okay, the gospel or the New Testament is around 2,000 years old. The Old Testament is around 3,500 or 4,000 years old, whatever the number is going on right now. So we are talking in terms of time. How are we talking in terms of time? In the same manner, scientists are also talking in terms of time.
Okay, but then why would you be tempted to sign on the dotted line with something like 6,000 years old? I mean, to claim that the world, to take it out of the cosmos for a second and just talk about the rock we're on, to claim that the world is 6,000 years old is to make a fairly straightforward claim about calendar time. I mean, because you're making that claim about, if I said, well, how long ago were the miracles depicted in the Bible, how long ago did they occur? You're saying, okay, walk back a day and another day and another day in the timeline of your life, and then it's before you were born, and then it's about 2,000 years before that. And a year is still a year. It's still 365 days of the sort that we would recognize. So you have a fairly standard view of time to capture that. And presumably you're walking that all the way back to the beginning, and then you just have 6,000 years to deal with.
Right. That is exactly correct. If I go back to Genesis, where it gives us the genealogies, and it says that so-and-so was the father of so-and-so, and he fathered this son when he was 150 years old. And there's a whole chain that goes back, and it's just a straightforward math problem.
Right.
So if you're going to believe the Bible, I believe the first 11 chapters of Genesis are to be taken as authoritative, and not just chapters 12 and on. So I just accept it in a straightforward way. I believe in a historical Adam. I don't believe in evolution at all. Well, let me correct that. I do believe in variation within species. So if every creationist, for example, looking at the human race, sees the different ethnic groups, Asians and blacks and whites and so on, and believes that they are all descended from Noah and his wife. So clearly we believe in variation within species, but we don't believe in the transformation of one species to another.
Right.
Okay, so I missed the evolution PowerPoint earlier. I discussed it right now, but I think Sam has clearly pointed out that how the time, this subsuming exercise that Doug tried to pull on us does not work. So I think it was made quite clear, because now he has stuck to his guns, Doug Wilson, and he has clearly stated that, okay, I will stick to the 6,000 year figure because of these genealogies. And if the 14 billion years point can be accepted by you, then accept it, reject it, whatever, it's 6,000 years. So this is where I think he's wrong, and we Muslims don't agree with him. These genealogies mentioned in the Bible never set out to express each and every lineage there was, and should not be taken as such, and we Muslims don't take them as such. It was probably a much longer era than these 6,000 years. Yeah, not in billions and billions of years. There might be in thousands of years or hundreds of thousands of years, but it was quite long. And because that is the time once Adam set foot on this earth, Adam was created, and a long time before that, the earth came into existence, and we accept all those processes that scientists describe for its creation. And about evolution, this is a sticking point for many Muslims as well. I guess for all Abrahamic religion people, because evolution, was the it is a thing that differentiates between strong conservatives from lax conservatives and liberals. It happens in a similar manner in Islam as well. You will find many scholars who are traditionalists decrying and rejecting evolution, except of course what Doug mentioned, diversity within the same species. But other than that, they reject it. But there you'll find many Muslims that accept evolution. I'm from one of those. I think evolution happens exactly or mostly exactly the way science has described them. But our viewpoint is it says nothing about whether there is a God or not. It's a separate exercise that has been co-opted by scientists because of other purposes. Otherwise, scientifically speaking, the process of evolution is pretty sound, pretty good to accept. And there may be improvements further down the line in the concept, but generally it has described this picture quite efficiently. There are improvements that are going on in our era as well, and some decades behind as well, and they'll keep going on. But I think the most of the important, significant aspects mentioned by evolution about our evolution are correct. Darwin evolution, or whatever the name is now these days.
Right. Okay. So I'm resisting the temptation to get into any of those details with you, because I really I do want you to educate me before we get sidetracked on anything. So your church is you're a post-millennialist rather than a pre-millennialist. Please unpick those concepts for us.
So most premillennialists are dispensationalists, the fellows I mentioned earlier. And the three main positions with regard to the millennium, which is the millennium is 1,000 years of peace that Christians like to fight about. So there you go. So you have the millennium, and the premillennialists believe that Christ returns prior to the millennium. So all of these, you have the fixed time period of the millennium, and then where you place the return of Christ with regard to that millennium. So the premillennialist believes that Christ will return, and then there's going to be 1,000 years of peace. The amillennialist, which is another view not mentioned here, the is a term of negation, which says that they believe the millennium is a figurative symbolic reality, the reign of Christians with Christ in the heavenly places. And then after some indefinite period of time, Christ returns. So there's no literal earthly millennium for the amillennialist. Then the postmillennialist believes that the gospel is going to be victorious. The nations will be discipled. The Great Commission will be successfully fulfilled. The nations will come to Christ, and that will usher in the millennium, this golden period, after which Christ will return post-millennium. So premillennial, Christ comes before it, post-millennial, he comes after, and amillennial believes there is no literal earthly millennium. So
I don't know where I can place Muslims in that in those three categories, but you tell me. I'm going to describe what we believe, and then you can place us within those three, either of those three, based on my description. So I think Muslims believe that the millennium was kicked off after Muhammad's arrival. He is the rider on the white horse, peace be upon him, in the book of Revelation. And thereafter, the millennium kicks off. And it kicked off, you can say, around 500, 600, says around 600 CE. And after 1,000 years of that millennium, around in 1500, 1600 CE, the breakout of Gog and Magog is mentioned in the book of Revelation, which happened exactly like that. The Western civilization, all of it, just went berserk. They colonized the entire planet, almost the entire planet. And even only Britain had, I think, conquered 1/5 of the entire world. So this is exactly, the history favors the interpretation of the Muslims in every respect you can look at it. Even Will Durant called this, the famous philosopher called this era Age of Faith. So it kicked off exactly as mentioned in the Bible. We believe in that portion of the all the Bible, but that portion specifically, because we don't think that it's wrong in the least. The millennium kicked off. We Muslims believe that Muslims and Christians ruled the world. All the disciples of Christ, they came to life, metaphorically speaking, because that's the first death that God mentions, and whoever will conquer it, second death will have no power over him. So we love and revere and discuss Peter and James and John and all the other disciples. We have been loving and mentioning them ever since that millennium kicked off. For the Christians, that kicked off a little earlier, you can say with the conversion of Constantine, but really Christianity came into its own certain decades or centuries after that. So you can say we generally align with the North generally being controlled by the Christians, the center and the South generally controlled by the Muslims. And it was an age of faith. This was the millennium that Jesus, peace be upon him, was referring to. It happened right at as per the clock mentioned there, and it is over now. But as far as Doug is concerned, he's a post-millennialist. I do not find that position tenable. I am more, if you just want to approach the book of Revelation and the Gospels in general as Christians approach, pre-millennialist position is more likely to be sound than the post-millennial position. Jesus said that he and his disciples will come before the millennium starts. So they came, and their coming was metaphorical. They were raised, their names lived on in this world, basically. It's the kind of thing that you hear in rap songs, that each person dies twice, once when he actually dies, and second time when his name is taken for the last time on earth. So it's something of similar sort that was being mentioned in the book of Revelation. There's all these disciples and Christ would come to life and then won't die ever till the day of judgment. And we can see even right now, Christ and his disciples are alive and well, metaphorically speaking. They are ruling the world right now. Christianity is on top of the world right now. So that is how Muslims view it. I'm not going to pick one of the categories that he just described, because I think Muslims' belief is a slightly different belief. But yeah, we also correspond that belief to the book of Revelation.
So in all the talk about the rapture that people are familiar with, and the Left Behind novels that were much talked about in secular culture and widely read in Christian culture, is that entire conversation a premillennialist one, or do you have some part in that as well?
No. That entire conversation is dispensational and premillennial. And most even the Reformed Calvinist Presbyterian types that I represent are not in the North American evangelical mainstream. We're a significant presence there, but North American evangelicalism is overwhelmingly dispensational, overwhelmingly premillennial. So postmillennialists like myself are very much in the minority report.
Right. Now,
that figures, because this position is quite untenable, by the way. And dispensationalism, that's something I want to discuss in some separate video. It's very interesting because much of the havoc we see right now in Israel-Palestine, dispensationalism has a role to play in it. People seldom accept it or concede to it, but there are a lot of undercurrents that are coming from the direction of dispensationalism that are messing up this entire Israel-Palestine issue. So I think I'll discuss it some other time. Yeah, I'm a fan of the Left Behind series as well. So we'll discuss it in some future time. But yeah, this is the Left Behind series is pre-millennial dispensationalism. I did not know it was pre-millennial or knew about these distinction between pre-millennial and post-millennial. So that is something I think I should thank Doug for educating me on.
It seems to me to have pretty big implications. I mean, so the problem with premillennialism, again, from a secular point of view, is that it seems to invite almost a kind of nihilism. I mean, it's sort of the worse things get on some level, the better things get from that point of view. The world can completely unravel, and at any moment, the good people are going to be raptured. There's nothing really to construct or to care for or to maintain here necessarily. But on your view, the postmillennial view, which frankly is a little more like the view of Islam, right? There's this notion of that we, the good religious people who believe in God rightly, effectively need to conquer the world and establish 1,000 years of peace and prosperity and good Christian order before history will properly end with the return of Christ.
Correct and brought.
Okay, but I don't appreciate the way Sam connects the Islamic belief with the post-millennial belief. I know there are similarities, but by and large, they're quite different. As I just described you, that we think the millennium started and ended, and there is no Jesus or no Jesus or disciples to come in their flesh. Yeah, they were supposed to come in a metaphorical situation, which happened in the Afghan war. America, as the Christ, landed in Afghanistan and helped the Muslims defeat communism, which was the Antichrist. All those prophecies about the second coming of Christ in Islam were fulfilled in that scenario. So yeah, you can connect it in that particular manner, but I still think that both things are not very similar, so that somebody can say that postmillennialism is like Islam. Actually, in another aspect also, the Muslims that are trying to raise havoc in this world, the ISIS type, the Daesh type people, the Al-Qaeda type people, they again believe in the very things that, yeah, once we will create the circumstances for Jesus's arrival, then he will come and support us Muslims. So the same nihilistic thinking that he's referring towards this premillennial stuff, it is happening right now among those Muslim extremist groups. So as I mentioned, that probably the position that is at least the tradition Islam sports aligns more with the premillennial position than the postmillennial one. But in this aspect that nobody is to come, Muslims have to do everything, the followers have to do everything, and then some savior will come. Yeah, that aspect does seem to align with the post-millennial position. So that's why I was reluctant in placing the Muslim interpretation in one of those categories, because of these inherent differences that preclude a clear alignment with any of these positions.
Outlines. The one difference that I would make is that Paul in 2 Corinthians 10 says that our weapons for doing this are not carnal. So we don't use physical force. It's not to be advanced by the sword.
Right.
In Romans 4:13, Paul says that Abraham was promised that he would inherit the world, but not by law, rather through the righteousness of faith. So that's the one thing. The other thing is, I think you're right about the and if you had a dispensationalist on, he could present a case for why maybe this is unfair. I'm not trying to be unfair to them, but I as I've watched the dispensational vibe affect Christians, the worse things get, the more people think that we're right on schedule.
Right. Yeah.
Okay, Jesus is going to appear anytime and take us out of here. And so they view because they also believe that we're in the last days. We're coming up on the last little bit.
Yeah.
And they feel like the last helicopter flight out of Saigon. The rapture is God helicoptering us out of here. And then you let the world go to blazes.
Which is on your account there.
So yeah, this is exactly what's happening with these extremist groups as well. They also think in similar terms, that the worse things get, the more closer we are to the arrival of the second coming of the Christ. So that's what I was referring to. that aligns particularly perhaps more with the premillennial thinking. But yeah, this aspect that Jesus is not going to come to make things better. We Muslims have to do it. Yeah, that's also something that aligns with the Muslim train of thought. So I think this is quite beneficial for Muslims to think of these things in these terms and see the kind of alignment that exists between Christianity and Islam that is going on in parallel in this world.
You're absolutely sure we're nowhere near the last days. In fact, we're probably not even within 1,000 years of the last days.
That's correct. I believe that future school children will be looking back on our era, studying us as part of the early church.
Right.
So I think we've got a long way to go. And I believe that our labors to make the world a better place are not in vain. As Paul says in 1 Corinthians 15:58, your labors in the Lord are not in vain. I believe that we can make the world a better place. And I believe that if God blesses, he will bless and prosper it. And we want to leave it better than we found it.
Yeah, this is also some place that we Muslims cannot agree. I stand I'm more strident than traditional Muslims, so I'll keep my opinion for the last. But generally in Islam, we are considered to be in the last days of this world. We can't put a number on it. No 1,000 years are remaining in any calculation of the Muslims. That has already happened. This is a direct result of post-millennial thought, I think. That those 1,000 years have not started. I think even the pre-millennials believe that those 1,000 years have not started, but they at least believe that Jesus is supposed to come before those 1,000 years begin. So that's something where we align with them. Jesus came, the 1,000 years started with the advent of Muhammad, peace be upon him. The 1,000 years ended around 1600 CE. And thereafter, Gog and Magog went and captured all the gates of the world. And then there was a massive war, World War II, which was the war of Gog and Magog. And the Great War, which was mentioned Al-Malhamad al-Uzma in Islam, after which the Antichrist was supposed to come forward. That was World War One. And those all happenings have occurred. So we are now in the final lap of this entire race. So this is how we Muslims look at it. And as far as Doug is concerned, I think he's way off with his post-millennial thinking.
So this seems to be a pretty big point around which to have such a difference of opinion. How is the difference of view here justified by recourse to the Bible? And what do the dispensationalists say you're wrong about, and how do you return the compliment?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. The way I describe it is this: let's say someone converts to Christianity while in college. Their life falls apart. They have a crisis conversion. They go buy a Bible, and they say, "I'm interested to find out what it teaches about the end times." Oftentimes, new Christians want to study the Book of Revelation first, which is not smart. But,
it's the climax.
And so they get a Bible and they start reading through it. And in Matthew 24, for example, Jesus describes what scholars call decreation language. Decreation language is what I call collapsing solar system language. The moon turns blood red, the sun goes dark, the stars fall from the heavens, and that's apocalyptic imagery. And Jesus uses it there in Matthew 24. So this new Christian reads it, and he says, "Okay, I'm a Christian now. I believe the Bible," and it talks about the sun and the moon and the stars all going out, and they go out and the sun just went down and the moon is right up there and the stars are all there. And so they say, okay, since this is true, it must be talking about the future. It must be talking about the end of the world, right? It hasn't happened yet. So it's talking about the end of the world. That's one way of approaching it. And that's the way the dispensationalists interpret it. And that school of thought is called the futurist approach. So you look at these prophecies and say, they clearly haven't happened yet, and so they must be something that is going to happen in the future. I belong to the preterist school of thought, and preter comes from the Latin word for past, where you look at this language in Matthew 24, and the disciples begin that chapter by saying, Jesus tells them, you see all these temple buildings, not one stone's going to be left on another. The disciples come to him and say, when's this going to happen? What will be the sign of the end of the age? And then Jesus lays out all of Matthew 24, in the course of which he uses that collapsing solar system language. Well, he's quoting from Isaiah 13.
Right.
And if you go back to Isaiah 13, verse 10, there's that language. And then you back up to the first verse of Isaiah 13, and it's an oracle concerning the king of Babylon. Okay. And then you say, okay, this same decreation language occurs in Isaiah 34, where it's applied to the king, applied to Edom. And then it happens in Ezekiel, where it's applied to Egypt. It happens in the book of Amos, where it's applied to Israel. It happens in the book of Joel, where it's applied to Israel. And so you say, okay, I want to interpret the New Testament from the lessons I learned reading the Old Testament. And everywhere in the Old Testament, where it uses decreation language, it's always talking about the destruction of a nation state or a city.
So you're thinking it's like 70 AD, this stuff came to pass?
Absolutely. So Jesus says expressly that this generation will not pass away until all these things have been fulfilled. So it's an idiomatic Hebraic way of saying your lights are going to go out. Your dynasty, your regime is going to collapse. It's going to fail. Everything is going to come down around your ears. So that and that's how it's used every time it's used in the Old Testament. It's always talking about that. And then Jesus says this temple is going to be destroyed, not one stone left on another. The disciples ask when this is going to happen. Jesus says within one generation, and then quotes the Old Testament to that effect. So basically, what Bertrand Russell, for example, and others have pointed out, Jesus thought he was living at the end of the world.
Yeah.
Well, I don't think Jesus thought that at all. I believe that Jesus thought he was living at the end of the Judaic Aeon, living at the end of the old Israel that was going to come crashing down in 70 AD.
Okay, this is so awesome because this is exactly what Muslims believe, what I believe as a Muslim. Because we are all preterists. Preterism is something that makes the most sense once you read the Bible. All these things were supposed to come true just after Jesus was ascended into heavens. And it was clearly mentioned that within one generation, this all is going to come. And Jesus coming on clouds, it was a metaphor for the judgment that is going to come to the Judaic people. So I think very eloquently described by Doug, not one iota of thing I would like to change in that. It's exactly the Islamic belief. All of this has passed, though that judgment came and went, and the Judaic eon ended, and the Christian eon started, and later on the Muslim eon started, and that was also prophesied in the Bible elsewhere. So this is exactly something that we Muslims also believe in.
Okay, a few more concepts here that I have questions about. So where does the concept of dominionism fit in here? What is meant by that term?
Okay, good. In Genesis, where God creates Adam, he delivers what is called the cultural mandate, to be fruitful, multiply, replenish the earth. Then after the flood, the cultural mandate is reinstated, and God gives the same basic cultural mandate to Noah and his descendants. Fill the earth, multiply, replenish the earth, take care of it. And then in the New Testament, I believe that we have a New Testament variation on the same theme in the Great Commission, where Jesus says, all authority in heaven and on earth has been given to me. Therefore, go disciple the nations, baptizing them, teaching them to obey everything I've commanded you. And then the book of Hebrews says we don't see everything subjected to man yet, but we see Jesus. So we walk by faith, looking to subdue the earth in a productive, flourishing way, and that is called in our circles exercising dominion. So it's not rape the earth; it's cultivate the earth so that it flourishes.
Yeah, but are you part of?
Okay, dominionism. This is something new to me. Okay, yeah, I don't see anything objectionable in there that Doug has said, but I'm a little bit unfamiliar with this dominionism concept, so I think I'm on the learning end here. Don't have much to offer here.
The New Apostolic Reformation, I associate dominionism with that movement.
No, that's basically that, as I understand it, is a movement that's going on in charismatics circles. And I think you'd probably find some areas of what they say that would map onto what we're saying, but we're coming from different places.
Okay, so what now to the title of your book? What is Christian nationalism, given all that you have said so far?
Yeah, Christian nationalism is, in the short form, is the conviction that secularism is a failed project. The attempt to govern ourselves without reference to a transcendent reality is coming up short, and we're starting to see the pieces fall off around us in a number of different ways. Post-World War II, sort of the liberal, democratic, secular heyday, the high watermark of liberal, democratic secularism. The United States was king of the hill, and everything looked like Fukuyama talked about the end of history. You know, it looked like we've gotten there. A lot of Christians sort of went along for the ride. Okay, I love my country, and things look swell, and the sky's still blue and everything. Beginning in the 60s with the sexual revolution, and then the downstream effects of the sexual revolution, and the place where we are now with drag queens and transsexuals and furries, and all the what I call the normies and the grillers. The suburban average Christian guy is looking at the world, and he thinks everyone has lost their ever-loving mind. What is going on? So Justice Jackson on the Supreme Court couldn't answer the question, what is a woman, in her confirmation hearings, because she's not a biologist, which is to me like saying I don't know whether it's raining or not because I'm not a meteorologist. But a lot of people looked at that. A lot of regular people looked at that, and they're just left aghast. And they've come to the conclusion, many of them, that the secular project has sort of done a faceplant, and particularly in the last 5 years, where I travel in circles where people believe that virtually every respected institution in America disgraced itself in the last 5 years, whether it was the military or Congress or the courts or higher education or the CDC or the military. Everything just came unstuck, and so a lot of people don't know what to believe anymore, don't know what to think. I grew up in a high trust society, and we are now at the dregs level, the basement level of we're a low trust society, and then some, and that leaves a lot of people susceptible to conspiracy theories and the latest thing they read on the internet. And other people, it's opened them up to things that we were saying 20 years ago or 30 years ago about the necessity of a confession that Christ is Lord. We need a transcendent grounding for what we say we're going to do as a people together. And if we don't have that transcendent grounding, then everything comes apart in our hands, as it is doing. So the conviction that secularism is a failed project and that Christians need to be Christians in public and say, I believe that what we need to do is confess our dependence upon God and upon his son, Jesus Christ, and orient ourselves that way. That's a short form of saying Christian nationalism.
Okay.
This is again also very interesting and relatable. Similar movements are occurring in the Islamic world as well. I think we discussed this in the beginning, that religion is making a comeback. Similarly, Islam is also making a comeback, especially in countries like Pakistan and Bangladesh and other such countries, where it looked like after the World War that people were going in a different direction, away from religion, but there was a watershed moment somewhere in the 90s or start of the millennium that thwarted and pushed everybody back into the direction of religion. So I agree with most of the stuff he said, being or at least consider myself to be a devout Muslim. So I think all of this resonates with the Muslim perception of the world a lot, and that is why Muslim nationalism is also making a comeback.
Well, great. Let me just make sure we're dealing with the same definition of secularism, because many people...
Yeah, this is the point that I wanted to highlight. I don't think he has secularism pegged down correctly. I don't think secularism necessitates, unchristian thinking or Christian practices not being adopted by people and persons in an individual and familial capacities. I think these both things aren't exactly mutually exclusive, but let's see what Sam has to offer.
Confuse that term with atheism, right? So secularism, in my lexicon, has no implication of atheism. It's simply an agreement, and it's really born of the Christian tradition, an agreement to keep religion out of politics and any kind of coercive posture with respect to public life. So you can be a Christian in the privacy of your life and in your home. I can be an atheist or a Muslim or a Buddhist or whatever I want to be, and we agree that in the public square, it's not that we're not going to express our faith in any conspicuous way. You can wear whatever you want to wear. You can listen, you can announce that you guys are celebrating on any given day a certain holy moment. But with respect to the laws that the government is going to make and the requirements on citizenry, those are going to be basically agnostic with respect to anyone's faith commitments. That's how I think.
And that's how I view secularism as well. So I think Sam has given the correct definition. Yeah, if you really get into the weeds of it, there will be places where this distinction cannot be maintained because morality is involved. I'm sure this is going to be dissected more in the next minutes or so. So I'm going to hold off on my comments up till now. But in principle, secularism is better defined by Sam Harris here than it was defined by, or at least alluded to be defined by, Doug Wilson.
Correct. And I can come partway in agreeing with you. Secular, at first, I agree that secular does not necessitate atheism. For example, in the medieval period, there were the regular clergy who were living according to monastic rule, and then there were the secular clergy who were out in the villages and towns ministering to regular people. Also, there is secular life that is the word profane comes from profanum, outside the temple. So you could say there's a sacred space, and then if we're using a lowercase s, there's the sacred space, word and sacrament, the worship services proper, and then there's the secular realm, which is the world of automobile mechanics and computer coding and just regular life. So I don't mind using the word secular there in that sense, and a Christian can be in his secular life a believer in God and so on. But secularism, the way I was talking about the secular project, had to do with the way you just formulated it. And this would be the thing that we find we're up against and what we disagree with. I believe that corporate entities like nations, towns, nations, cities, denominations, universities are moral agents. They can launch genocidal attacks, for example. They can break treaties. They can oppress a minority within their boundaries. A university can break a contract that they made with a professor. They can break their word. So individuals are moral agents, but when we come together to act in concert, we remain moral agents.